Hello everyone, happy to see you here online, unfortunately for the merits and limits of preregistration for VIS research. My name is Lonnie and I'm presenting this on behalf of my co-authors that you can see here. I want to first highlight that this paper stems from many discussions that we had between us co-authors, but also discussions within the whole scientific community across different domains. First things first, what is preregistration? Preregistration is the process of recording, if you think of the research pipeline like this, the data collection and analysis before you actually start doing it. The goal of this is to allow reviewers to then compare the recording that we said we would do versus the actual paper that we submitted when they get to peer review our manuscript. In practice, it looks like a document that you can see here on the right with a timestamp given and then with different sections that then correspond to the paper on, for instance, participant recruitment and data analysis, and the reviewers can compare these to validate that we did do what we said we would do. The idea behind this paper stems from an IEEE VIS 2022 panel that we co-organized with Mohammed and Cody, and for which we invited Brian, Tamarinda, and Mariah to talk. From this panel stems three different things that I want to highlight here. The first thing is that preregistration is a plan and not a prison. What I mean by that is that deviations from your plan are allowed. Remember this graph when I said that actually if reviewers compare, they need to manually check that you did do what you said you wanted to do. Sometimes there will be mismatches, and that's actually fine. If you actually did what you said you would do, then you just report it as is in a paper, right? But if you couldn't, then you can transparently report in a paper that you initially planned to do X, Y, or Z according to the pre-registration, but because of a specific reason you couldn't, and instead you used another method that gives you another set of findings. So the only thing that this forces you to do is to be transparent about what you have done, and this won't prevent your paper from being published at all. In fact, looking back at my papers, I have deviated from my pre-registrations quite often, and all of these papers have been published, so it's really not an issue there. A common misunderstanding is that pre-registration is only for quantitative analysis, and this stems probably from the fact that we use it a lot for clinical trials. But it can also be used for other kinds of research. For instance, Tamarinda here co-authored a paper on the pre-registration of qualitative research and giving some templates and advice and benefits of doing so. Looking at our own paper here, we actually have pre-registered it. There's a specific part of the paper that is a LLM-based summary of the panel that was done through ChatGPT and pre-registered. So we report on it in a paper, the pre-registration is available online, and we also report on the deviations we have and the actual summary per speaker as we wanted to do initially. But thinking of the different kind of flavors of research that we have in VIS, if you think of system and software papers, for instance, what could be pre-registered, is the performance variables that we want to focus on or the data sets that we plan to test this on. For the review or survey papers, we could easily pre-register the inclusion or exclusion criteria, the queries to find papers, the appraisal criteria, or the potential use of standards like Prisma. For user studies, I'm not going to dive into this. There's many papers on this. But for theoretical paper, there's not a lot of research done on how pre-registration could be useful there. But we think, we co-authors, that it could be used maybe to record our prior assumptions or our motivations. The last thing about pre-registration is that it's all about epistemologies, right? When we think of research, when most people think of research, they think of hypothesis-driven research, right? Which is positivist research. But there's many other epistemologies, especially in VIS research. But for hypothesis-driven research, it is fairly obvious that there's a close tie between replicability, reproducibility, and pre-registration. But for non-hypothesis-driven research, perhaps pre-registration could be adapted to help us record positionality statements or pre-reflections or reflections across processes, even to serve as maybe something like an open laboratory notebook to retrace all the steps of the research that we have done. And this is something that the VIS community is already thinking about if you think of analytical provenance, that is one of the topics of research that we have, as exemplified by this paper. Or if you think perhaps of this design study from Rogers et al., in which the authors actually designed a whole website to link every finding or decision they have in their paper back to some specific artifact of their research process. The problem is that such website was made as a companion website and was not really directly available through the paper because we only submit PDFs, right? But that's maybe something that Jovi, a newly started journal with, for instance, Matt Kay here in the audience, can help with, because we allow people to submit interactive web-based papers through GitHub, for instance. So yes, it is all about epistemologies, and maybe preregistration as we see it today is not really adapted to all the flavors and epistemologies of research that we have in the VIS community, but maybe it could be adapted to actually be helpful in those cases too. In the paper, we also give some practical advice on how to pre-register the platforms and their benefits, but I'm not going to dive into this here. So I want to summarize this whole paper by saying that pre-registration is very tightly linked to replications and replicability, of course, but it does not equate replicability at all. Pre-registration is but a tool to help us transparently report on our processes and decisions and results, right? Among many other tools, right? There's many others that people can use and maybe should use in some cases. But yeah, pre-registration does not equate good research at all. And, you know, it's not going to replace good and good thinking and strategic discussions and iterations over your designs at all. It's just a tool to help people report and think about some of the things that they're doing. And I would know quite well about this, and this is a bit of a shameless plug, because if you see here the headlines of a science article about some of my findings on bad papers, I can tell you that some of the studies that I reported on are sometimes pre-registered, and that doesn't prevent them from being bad. I invite you to come to my poster presentation on Tuesday about this, so that we can talk about this more if you're interested. So to conclude, pre-registration is a tool that we can use and that maybe the VIS community should work on to adapt to all the flavors of VIS research that exists, so that we have something that is useful for everyone. And maybe it will change name actually. Maybe it will not be exactly a pre-registration, but a pre-reflection. Or maybe it's going to be something completely different even. But the idea behind this is we want to increase the transparency of our processes so that they can be reused among the community by other researchers. So I think we're the best researchers to do this work because we deal also with human-computer interaction, and the transparency of research processes is a human-computer interaction problem. I invite you all to actually come to our OSF repository, where there's a Google Doc for you to put some thoughts and start some discussions if you want. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take your questions.